Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Knowledge Group webcast, as we're going to be discussing a comprehensive guide on intelligence process automation and leveraging opportunities. Well, my name's Andy McLeod. I'll be your moderator for the program this afternoon, and we're going to hand things over to our speakers in a very brief moment. Just want to quickly point out over the next few slides, you will see some information about our participants, as well as their respective firms, and some answers to some of our most frequently asked questions. Now, for those viewing today's webcast with a PC or Mac, you'll see the event's chat window on the right-hand side of your screen, where you'll be able to see information about our speakers, and using the Q&A tab, submit a question for our question and answer session. The questions themselves won't appear, but we will address as many as we can in the order received towards the end of today's program. On screen now, you'll see a link to sign up to our 14-day free trial, giving you access to some of our live and recorded programs. And in the event of any technical issues, we suggest refreshing the event page first, but if those continue, there is some alternate connection information included in your reminder email that we sent out earlier today. If you do have any other questions or concerns, you can reach the team at any time via email. The address you need is info@theknowledgegroup.org. We also have our live chat service on our website should you need immediate assistance. Now, speaking of the website, it's a great way to see the certificates you've earned, continuing education requirements, and much more. You can do that on the go as well with our Knowledge Group app, and you can get that for both iOS and for Android. Now, finally, we will be sending a very brief feedback survey via email after this event has concluded. If you're applying for continuing education credit today, that survey is mandatory, serving as your proof of attendance required by state bars and boards. So I'll be reading 6 secret words at random times during the webcast today. You'll need to make a note of those and enter them into that survey to satisfy that proof of attendance. So before we begin today, I want to start by thanking our participating sponsor, Autorio AI, as well as our partner firms, ISG Automation, GM Financial, and Consequently Global LLC. Their information is on screen now. I want to extend our thanks to today's panelists for their time, help, and support in preparation for today's webcast. Finally, a massive thank you as well to our attendees joining us on the line, be that live or on demand. So let's begin by introducing our panelists. We'll be hearing from Rohit Gupta today, the CEO and co-founder of Autoria.ai, where Rohit founded Autoria AI in 2019 with the vision of ushering a new paradigm in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and automation for ERP financial applications. He is responsible for conceiving, developing, communicating, and growing Autoria's strategy and business as an industry pioneer in the next generation of autonomous, self-driving finance back office. And most recently, he was Group Vice President for Cloud Security at Oracle Corporation, having joined via the acquisition of Polera, the industry's first API-centric cloud access security broker, where he was founder and CEO. We'll also be hearing from Wayne Butterfield today, Director, Global Lead of Intelligence Automation Solutions over at ISG Automation, where Wayne is Global Lead, as I mentioned, for Intelligent Automation Solutions. Wayne is responsible for all AI and cognitive automation deployments across ISG, either building on existing RPA deployments or moving straight into AI and cognitive via the use of chatbots, machine vision, and NLP, machine learning, and much more. Wayne provides director oversight on all AI and cognitive automation engagements and owns the business-wide scanning function in ISG Automation. And he runs the CTO office, an internal capability that continually scans the technology market for new and innovative solutions and methodologies, and to keep ISG Automation at the cutting edge of all things AI and automation. We'll also be hearing from Matthew Maffrey today, Senior Business Automation Manager of Operational Excellence over at GM Financial, where Matt is Senior Business Automation Manager at GM Financial, based in Fort Worth, Texas. And prior to joining GMF in October 2018, he was continuous improvement Lean Six Sigma leader at other auto finance companies in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And in his current role, Matt leads a team responsible for automation program support, including areas such as data collection and data reporting and citizen developer program. Janine Nosker will be our final speaker, VP of Delivery Transformation over at Consequently Global LLC, where Janine serves as VP for Delivery Transformation for Consequently, leveraging over 15 years of leadership expertise in finance and accounting. And she is responsible for overseeing the firm's solutions efforts to incorporate technology to overall optimize efforts, ensuring that the highest level of support is available at all levels of client engagement. So without further ado, we'll turn things over to our speakers. But before we do hear from our very first speaker, Wayne will be leading us off. As we turn things over to slide number 12, I just want to give our first secret word of the day, where secret word number 1 is automation. That's AUTOMATION. So automation is our first of today's 6 secret words. As slide number 12 is on screen. Wayne, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And hello, everybody, and welcome. Great to be here for the next 20 minutes discussing a little bit about my background, about the market, the automation market, and where it's maneuvering towards. And obviously, really great that I'm the first person kicking off, hopefully to give you some background. And having seen the presentations of everybody else, I think I'm going to lay some foundations, and they're really going to be built on by the other speakers. So can I just move to the next slide, please? So a little bit of background about me and also the market. So I started in automation in 2010. I was a very early adopter of a technology type called robotic process automation. This was eventually picked up by an analyst firm called Horses for Sources in around 2012, where they coined a new country called Robotistan, which was basically the new outsourcing destination where all of our work that we currently outsource, we were going to automate using RPA instead. Now, pretty certain that the BPO market and the service provider market is still flourishing. So clearly Robotistan is not as big as what the analysts initially thought nearly a decade ago. But obviously this term of RPA has continued to gain momentum. And as you will see shortly, there is some huge numbers associated with some of the firms that are pioneering in this space right now. In 2014, we coined the term intelligent automation. I believe it's Forrester who first did this. This was building on RPA, and obviously with today, it's a term that's well used, which encompasses a number of different technologies, which I will come into in due course. 2016 saw our first public listing. This was a company called Blue Prism. It was a company I first used when I was at Telefonica at O2, and automated around about 1 million transactions a month, and saved around 350 to 400 people out of our traditional back office, both onshore and offshore. So some really big numbers, and Blue Prism was the first. The market leader at the moment is a company called UiPath. UiPath raised their Series A back in 2017. They raised their Series E quite recently. If you can move on to the next slide, there are a few other entrants into the market. One of them being a big American-based company called Automation Anywhere, who are just about to IPO. 2020 saw Gartner coin the term hyper-automation. Now, love it or hate it, I'm going to talk a little bit about this because I think it's incredibly important that we look at the evolution of the technologies that we are making use of as we look to deliver operational efficiency. I alluded to 2021 being a big IPO. UiPath shares launched, I think it was $54. They peaked at $80, and they're now down at about $70 per share. It gave them a valuation, I think, of about $38 billion. Now, bearing in mind, when I first started in this market 10 years ago, UiPath were about 7 people in a loft in Romania. So, significant growth in the last decade, and congratulations to the guys there. What does the future hold? Well, it's really interesting. One thing I've learned over the last decade is this market does not stand still, and it doesn't stand still for one main reason. If you move on to the next slide, It's because of AI. And although RPA itself is not artificial intelligence, and anybody who says it is, I will debate that with them. But it is a catalyst, and it has been a foundation for a lot of organizations to move from basic automation into some very clever technologies. The ones I think are probably most important, and bearing in mind AI as is not a single thing; it's actually a collection of technology types. Somewhere in the region of about 200 different technology types could fall under the AI banner. I picked a few here. I really like this slide just to bring out some of the ones that are really important to the enterprise, especially as we start to think about automation. Things like natural language processing, so this ability to look at text, obviously speech. We spend a lot of time communicating. Robotics. This is the physical robots versus the software ones, but we'll pretend for today's program that it's RPA. And then vision, so this ability to see, and whether that's a driverless car or OCR looking at an invoice, these are all key characteristics. So when we talk about automation, it can really go hand in hand with AI. And for anyone who is fully aware of the progress that we're making with AI at the moment, it's obviously one of the key reasons why the market continues to move forward. And also why 2021 and beyond is going to be incredibly interesting as all of these different technologies collide to create business value in the enterprise. If we quickly move on to the next slide, I think this is hyper automation for me. So what's the difference between RPA, intelligent automation, and hyper automation? Well, RPA is a single tool. It's a single piece of capability. Very, very good at copying and pasting and moving data. Fantastically strong in moving from Excel into an SAP tool. Basic rules-based processes. But not all organizations, and certainly not all processes, are set up in a way that all people do is move data from one place to another. There's always some type of intelligence. And so RPA alone is not going to help transform your organization. You need more technologies. Now, the way I break this down and thinking about kind of RPA versus AI is I think about RPA as being handwork, right? So think about what you do in the office with your hands. You're generally typing, you're moving your mouse, you're moving from one place to another. That's handwork, right? Pretty basic, mundane, repetitive tasks. AI is your head work, right? So if you think about the capabilities in your head, you're looking, you're reading, you're understanding, you're deciding, you're communicating. These are all characteristics that sit within process. You don't do them with your hand. Generally, you don't communicate with your hand, conscious that some people do. But in the main, you're not necessarily looking at an invoice through your hand. You're not making a complex decision with your hand. You're doing all of that with your head. So you think about intelligent automation, it's getting the handwork and the head work together. Now that's intelligent automation. It's a spectrum of technologies that cover multiple different characteristics. Reading emails, looking at an invoice, making a complex decision, communicating as though you're a customer service advisor, as well as moving data from one place to another. And that combined is intelligent automation. Hyper automation is the next wave of this, okay? So it's all of this intelligent automation technologies, but actually it's about a way of uncovering opportunities at an enterprise scale. And having been in this, this arena for over a decade now, I'll tell you what we used to do. We used to sit and look at a process and say whether we could automate it or not. It's a very manual process. You'd sit down with an SME and you would say, yeah, you're ticking that characteristic, and this characteristic. I can automate that process. And that is actually very good. However, if you imagine large enterprises, you imagine entire finance departments, if you have to do that for every process and every task, it would take you a very, very long time. And so this area of process discovery has really been booming. Probably over the last kind of 2 to 3 years, we have our first unicorn in this space in Celonis, which is a process mining tool. But it's certainly not just process mining that we need to be mindful of here. Really, we need to be thinking about the different types of activities that we do. And therefore, there are different technologies that are good at uncovering what you are doing in those types of process or tasks. And I use the term process and task interchangeably at times, but actually a process can often, involve multiple people, multiple departments, entire customer journeys. A task could be one small part of that particular process. So they are interchangeable, but also they can be quite different. There are different technologies that look at process mining. There are different technologies that look at tasks. There are different technologies that look at communications. So looking at an email, reading an email, uncovering insight out of a verbal conversation. These are not processes, they're communications. But again, there are tools that are enabling us to mine communication, to find process, tasks, and insight. And it's this process discovery layer that is incredibly important and growing in importance for the enterprise. So if you imagine we really understand what's going on in our business, we have analytics, we understand our processes, they've been documented, we have data that surrounds them, we know volumes, we know who's doing them, when, SLAs. All of this now is information that's available to us. We then know what we should be automating in a much more strategic manner versus the task by task manual review that we've historically had to do. Once we've automated though, and again, this is where hyper automation for me really flows through, is once we've automated, the one thing that I think we've struggled with as an industry to date is proving and showing value, is enabling an organization to see where value has been created, to prove that value has been created, and to allow an organization to extract that. And that's where these kind of process discovery tools flip on the other side of automation and actually give you a data-led approach to benefit realization. So not only are we using data to uncover and understand our enterprise, we're using technology to automate, but they're also using data to prove that what we have automated has added the value we expect. And I give you a really great example. Process mining, very strong in finance, by the way, for things like procure to pay, end to end. Okay, and there was one organization, they used process mining. What they found was that there were 200 to 300 different variants of how an invoice could flow through their process and be paid. There's no way we'd manually be able to see all of those intricacies, different approvals from different people in different systems for different amounts, for different products. Really, really complex. Process mining enabled us to see these 300 different variations. Then we're able to then automate some of those core ones. What we then saw is rather than see actual benefit, what we saw was that there was actually a bottleneck that we moved from place A all the way down to place C. So actually, from a customer perspective, we didn't actually see any benefit because their invoices were still being paid on average in 32 days, despite the fact that we believe by automating a higher up part of the process that we would shave off 5 to 7 days worth of time. Actually, what we found is that we just moved the bottleneck to somewhere else in the process. And it's that type of insight that I think really separates RPA, intelligent automation, and this view of hyper automation. It's not just how quickly and how much can you automate, but it's this data-led approach throughout the process that really enables you to, understand, but then show that you have created actual value for your customers, for your staff, and obviously for your shareholders. So if we move on to the next slide, again, I just want to talk about why it's important to look at multiple different technologies. And as we start to think about, and I always go back to characteristic of a process. So I'm very keen on breaking down a process into the activities that you are doing and the part of our human makeup that we are using, right? Is it typing? Is it reading? Is it looking at something? Is it making a decision? I'm really keen on breaking down any process into the thing that we do, not what you're doing, but what is the characteristic? What's the human capability that you are using when you are doing that thing? And what that means is that you can be extremely generic and an expert across any process once someone has confirmed what it is that they're doing. Now, the reason why that's important is because you find different characteristics in different parts of your business. So if we look at the back office, it's generally very transactional heavy. There's lots of use of things like OCR. There's lots of data extraction. There's lots of data manipulation. We see a lot of that in finance and accounting. Certainly a lot of data manipulation. It never feels like any system ever gives us the data we need in order to do month-end closing, certainly with the organizations that I've worked with historically. But that is, a lot of it is very repeatable, very transactional. And so things like RPA, very strong in that particular area. As we start to get into the middle office though, and we start to think about, okay, analyzing data, making decisions, this is where our more senior employees are. They're paid the big bucks because they're making decisions. They're not copying and pasting and moving data from one place to another. They're actioning. They're creating actions on the back of the data that's being provided for them. And so there are different technologies that you need to use if you're going to start automating processes within this particular area. Things like natural language generation, which for a lot of organizations, it's taken numerical data and it's been able to produce summaries, text-based summaries of what that data is telling us. Incredibly useful, I've seen in kind of month-end, quarter-end, annual closing, and summarizing the results of an organization in a text format. It's used quite a lot by journalists at the moment. So really interesting technology there. Things like cognitive reasoning and machine learning, so using the data that's provided to make decisions, and more importantly, to make predictions. Again, we see that very much in this middle office space rather than the back office. And then interestingly, in the front office, again, we see a completely different set of technologies that are incredibly useful. And that's because in the front office, we are generally conversing with our customers, whether it's by email, instant message, social media, on the phone, etc. And so we just have a different technology set that we need to make use of. So different parts of your business are going to need to use different aspects, different types of technology to deliver value in this intelligent automation workspace. Last and final slide. I think I'm just about on time. So there's some key things to consider, right? I've spoken a lot here about technology. My background is not actually even technology, right? My background is operations. So I have run customer service. I have pioneered in moving customers from operations and phone customer service into digital channels, into online communities, into self-service. My background is core customer service, customer experience. But I'm a problem solver. And certainly in my background, one of the problems I was always given was, Wayne, we need to do more, but we need to spend less. How do we do that? And so we've always, I've always found technology has been the way for me to achieve those kind of business objectives. And so, although I've talking a lot about technology, I'm not going to underplay the amount of people and process and how important that is to successful automation programs. Now, a lot of the technologies I've spoken about, they seem quite complex, but actually a lot of them are no code, low code. They're very easy to pick up. They're also quite cheap. A lot of them are quite cheap. And that's very good because in theory, it's easy to use the technology. So it's quite easy to get started. But actually, it might be easy to get started, but this is not easy. No change is easy. Transformation is hard. So, getting started, it's not hard, but it's not that easy to get right. And it's something that you just need to have your eyes wide open as you move into this. I'm a big believer in culture and process being incredibly important to the success of any change program. And I say culture because, if you are happy with change, if you are forward thinking, if you want to change, then this is a great enabler. If the organization does not want to change, you're really going to struggle with this. So culture is incredibly important, and process probably even more so. These technologies all rely on your processes being fit for purpose. It doesn't matter whether you've got 1 million people or 100 people. If your processes are not set up, working, standardized, and fit for purpose for automation, you are not going to be able to automate a great deal, or you're not going to get these returns. So process is incredibly important. The question I'm often asked is, do we automate as is, or should we refine our processes? I'll give you a typical consultant answer. It really does depend. So there's no set answer from me. Never automate a bad process, but why spend 6 months reviewing something that has worked incredibly well for you as an organization for a long time, especially if you don't have the data surrounding the process. One of the great things that automation will do, it will give you data, which you often don't get in manual processes. Which obviously is the third point there. Now, the thing I also want to kind of raise just as a thing to consider is this technology can and should work for everybody, right? The technology is proven. The thing that's always the variable is your organization and your process, right? Marketeers have had their way in this particular space, and some of the things I've seen, the vendors spout around how quick, how cheap, what these return on investments should be are unrealistic. Okay, and what that means is that they've got unrealistic expectations, and when you haven't quite hit them, your project is deemed as a failure. Now, for me, failure is always posted against expectations. If you set your expectations right, it's very difficult for this type of technology to actually fail. Okay, those expectations are set too high, you're listening to the vendors too much, you suddenly think that you're going to be able to cut out 50% of your workforce, create huge opportunities. You just need a dose of realism. Change is hard. This is going to rely on your people and your process. This is not just a quick win. For me, this is a way of working. It's a culture shift. It's more than a technology. It is changing the way that you work. And that is not easy. Okay. But if you get your expectations right at the start, there is significant value in an intelligent automation program. And it's not just me saying this now. I've been doing this for a decade, but it is a well-worn path now. Help's always at hand. I'm part of a huge community of incredibly helpful, knowledgeable people who have automated anything and everything across just about any type of organization you can imagine, from healthcare to financial services and anything and everything in between. There is always help at hand. There is a fantastic community on LinkedIn, including my fellow panelists here. And so help will always be at hand. So never feel that you don't know where to go, because there's definitely people who can help. And with that, I think I can hand back over, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Wayne. Before we do hand things over to Matt, just wanted to give our timely second secret word. Process is secret word number 2 of 6. That's PROCESS. So process is our second of today's 6 secret words, as we put slide number 19 on screen now. And Matt, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours. Apologies for the brief interruption, but over to you whenever you're ready.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity to speak a bit about our automation journey at GM Financial, and specifically citizen innovation. So before I dive in here, just a brief overview of myself. As mentioned earlier, I'm a business automation manager at GM Financial here in Texas. I've been with the company for about 2.5 years. Before GMF, I was at a couple of other auto finance companies here in the area, and I was actually primarily in Lean Six Sigma and a continuous improvement role. So this is actually my first go around with automation. And currently I'm responsible for our business automation enabling team. So we do support our automation program here in a number of ways, including data management, and also leading the business facing side of our new citizen developer program, or citizen bot builder, as we like to call it, which I'm going to be talking about today. So we can move on to the next slide, please. Great. So just a couple of quick notes on GM Financial as a company, and you can kind of peruse the rest on your own time. But obviously, we are the captive finance arm of GM in Detroit. We offer APR financing, lease financing, as well as commercial lending service and dealer floor plan financing. We currently have over 9,000 employees company-wide, and we work with about 15,000 or so dealerships worldwide, primarily in the US, Canada, and several Latin American countries. So next slide, please. So before I kind of dive into the main topic that I wanted to tell you about today, I did want to give you a bit of a background on kind of how we got here as a company. I think it's kind of an interesting story. I know each organization kind of has their own automation journey. And as I mentioned, I've been with the company since about late 2018, so almost 2.5 years now. So I've been fortunate to kind of be a part of this journey since pretty early on. So just working here briefly from left to right. In 2018, we were really focused on just standing up the automation program. So just RPA, really focused on a limited number of projects. How do we establish this automation framework? We actually had a third-party partner who was building our automations for us, and it was a very kind of tight, centralized governance team that was leading the effort. And then moving right there into 2019, we finished up the pilot program, which did obviously demonstrate the value. We expanded out to additional kind of high traffic business areas. And then towards the end of the year, we actually brought our automation development in-house, and we transitioned to a new tool, which we're currently using, Automation Anywhere, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. And then in 2020, last year, we did shift our delivery model a bit to be a bit more agile, and we aligned our development teams against certain business units. And we also started exploring unstructured data tools and completed a pilot there. And then towards the end of the year is when we really got serious about standing up this citizen developer program that I'm going to be diving into here. And we did a pilot for that. And then this year, kind of bringing us up to current day here, we are building out and have built out kind of a formal framework for our developer program, our Citizen Bot Builder program. And we are also actively exploring additional automation tools and citizen innovation opportunities beyond just RPA. So in other words, how can we get additional tools into our business partners tool set? So next slide, please. So what exactly is citizen innovation? This is kind of how we're thinking about it. I know that for different organizations, you may have a slightly different definition here. And it's pretty simple at face value, but kind of before where we were, we collected ideas from our business partners, evaluated a handful of those, and more or less acted as an advisor on which ideas to automate. Where we're trying to get to is how do we equip and empower our team members, our business users, to innovate and automate where they sit? So can we give them the skills and tools to do this themselves and not have to rely on them kicking something over the proverbial fence to a centralized team to automate? So that's kind of where we're getting a lot closer to in the current state. So next slide, please. So just to get a little more specific on what we mean by citizen innovation. So what are the actual capabilities that we are either currently doing or are moving towards standing up for our business users? So obviously kind of working top down here, RPA, everyone's here with RPA, but how do we set up a framework to train and allow business users to actually build their own bots? We're actually on track to train about 30 business users initially by about the July or August timeframe. That was kind of our goal we set out at the beginning of the year. Fairly small, controlled group to kind of build out the framework. What does it look like? Tweak here and there if we need to. Other automation tools. So if you think about things like Microsoft Office 365 and their Power Platform suite, are there other things beyond just traditional RPA that we can leverage to provide our business users access to? Process improvement. So this would be your more traditional continuous improvement skill set, things like Lean Six Sigma, white, green, yellow, black belt certifications, and general process excellence skills and tools. So as we all know, automation is not always the answer depending on the problem that you're looking at. So how can we get them thinking the right way about the problems that they're trying to solve, about the processes that they potentially want to automate? Again, automation may not always be the right answer. So productivity tools. So another thing that I think a lot of us kind of take for granted, but are there collaboration tools that we can provide our team members to help them work better together, things like that. And then lastly here, specialized skill sets, which is kind of interesting. So can we, as we are upskilling our employees, can we build out dedicated training paths or even partner with HR on career roadmaps to help upskill everyone and really prepare them for the jobs of the future? One thing that I would just add before we move on here that is very important to note, that we meaning a centralized automation governance team cannot do all of these things alone, obviously. So we have to partner with various groups such as HR, training, process excellence, et cetera, to get all of this done. So that's one thing that I would definitely recommend keeping in mind as you are thinking about how to roll out some sort of a citizen innovation or development program that you're going to have to involve many groups outside of your core automation team. Next slide, please. So what are some of the key benefits in having a citizen development or innovation program? So starting here on the left side, is working down here. So as mentioned earlier, there are so many processes and smaller tasks that are really out there that are right for automation. So enabling our business partners to be able to pick out what to automate within a certain set of guardrails is really going to widen your value proposition. So it's almost like it's a sometimes shallower but much wider field of automated processes that you have, but we're still able to automate the big stuff through a centralized, more experienced team if we need to. Second here, we really need to, again, provide more tools and skills to users to help them solve their own problem. And then third here, regarding employee engagement, this is really critical, I think, especially in the light of the last year and the transition to a work from home environment. Really ensuring that your people are engaged and are learning new skills and upskilling them is a really big benefit to standing up a citizen innovation program. And then kind of sister to this point is the concept that we like to call the democratization of automation. So the way that we like to think about it here is that we, being a centralized team, are not the kings and queens of automation. So we should not be necessarily dictating to our employees what they should do. So we need to give them the skills and set up certain guardrails, but let them decide for themselves what they need to automate. And then lastly, one thing that we're really working on is that it also builds a community of practitioners who are able to share ideas, keep momentum going, and even potentially share some of the actual automation solutions that they're building, if it makes sense. Really one additional thing that I would mention here that's not captured on the slide is that we also like to describe that we can't do all the fishing ourselves. We need to teach others how to fish. So if we can empower these business users to innovate and automate things where they sit, then in the short term, it can really free us up as a centralized team to focus on more complex end-to-end projects and intelligent automation solutions that we're talking about here today. And the long term, those same business partners are going to be skilled to be able to assist us with things like unstructured data and intelligent automation solutions as well. And just touching on a few quick points here on the right-hand side. So this is just a super high-level overview of kind of our automation lifecycle with the 4 major phases or stages there. So really wanted to call out kind of how business users out there can really get involved and help us out in these areas. So the first point here on ideation and process discovery. So obviously, these folks know their processes and pain points way more than we do. So definitely want to empower them to bring the ideas. Second, just working down, give them the skills and knowledge to evaluate those ideas. So we can assist if needed, but reviewing processes and making the determination if it's a good fit for RPA or another automation technology, it's not rocket science. We can provide them a certain set of skills and templates and tools to do that type of work for us. So, and then thirdly, as you onboard users into some sort of a citizen development or innovation program, definitely keep in mind that they're going to have other day-to-day duties, generally speaking, than a dedicated developer. So definitely want to push them and empower them to keep delivering. For example, we do have a goal for all of our citizen developers to build at least one automation or bot a quarter. So, and then lastly here, since these citizen innovators or developers have built and designed these automations, they should, in most cases, be able to troubleshoot and fix these ideas themselves. So that kind of eases some of the prod support burden from a centralized team as well. Okay, next slide, please. So how does citizen development work? So these are really more some things to keep in mind, some kind of tips and tricks or early learnings that we've gained from our automation program. Definitely would recommend taking kind of a crawl, walk, run mentality, but at the same time, don't be scared to dive in. So it's really not quite as complicated and difficult to stand something up as you might think. So I just wanted to highlight a few areas that we've definitely taken away early on in the program. So just working top to bottom here. So governance, you definitely do want to set up those proper guardrails or controls, including any necessary cyber or IT touch points. And also you want to be transparent upfront and involve all those necessary parties, including cyber, IT, compliance, audit, to make sure that everyone is aware of what you're trying to do. That way they have a vested interest and they are able to provide input to your process. Also build data collection and management into the process upfront. You want to definitely define where you can and where it makes sense, what metrics you want to collect from these citizen developers, and what that looks like. That way you can capture the value that you're creating. And then also what we typically like to think about is people, process, and technology. So early on, as you're kind of planning to launch your version of a citizen innovation or development program, you may want to think about in a few different aspects. So people who will participate, process, what procedure will we follow, and then technology, which software or tool will we use to accomplish this. And then just moving down into framework. So definitely would recommend, highly recommend to create a detailed process that citizen developers will follow step by step, all the way from onboarding through delivery and prod support. So the example here to the right, it is a very high level process. So I know you can't read it because it's too small, but the idea here is that the top swim lane here are the business developers, and the lower swim lane are our IT partners. And we have set up a number of touch points or toll gates, basically, that even as we are upskilling these employees to do this work, we still want to make sure that we have set up certain guardrails, and that when needed, that we are passing those toll gates over to our more experienced IT developers to provide feedback or to help them with any roadblocks along the way. Also, consider all aspects of your citizen development activity, including areas such as organizational change management and how they may want to involve their teams and business partners. And then also don't delay conversations up front on how you may want to scale out this program well beyond your initial kind of controlled pilot or user base. And then lastly, there under framework, don't forget about change management. I know that as automation practitioners, I know that this is one thing that we all like to keep in mind, is that it's great to get to the point where you have these great automation solutions in production, but then things happen, applications change, enhancements are needed, et cetera. So definitely don't discount the work on that part of it once these citizen developers have automations out there in production. And then lastly, just at the bottom here, support. Definitely be prepared up front to invest a lot of time and resources to help these business users through the initial learning curve. The way that we're doing it at GM Financial is that these truly are business users. So they do not typically have any programming or coding experience going in. We're providing them the training material, but we are staying pretty close to them as they move through the training course and building their first automation, especially. So kind of to that point there, definitely provide them with comprehensive training material via either courses they can go through or other application-specific training material that they can utilize to kind of move through that initial learning curve. And then also ask them for a lot of feedback early on, especially if you're doing some sort of a controlled pilot up front. How can we improve this framework or process? How can we make it more efficient? Are there things that we're doing that we really don't need to be doing, et cetera? So yeah, definitely ask for feedback there. One interesting thing that we're working on currently actually in this space is how can we go really fast and stand up in automation in as little as like 1 to 2 weeks time for super simple processes or tasks. And we're kind of working on a pilot for that. So that should be interesting. And then lastly, cultivate the user community. So one cool thing that we're doing in this area is we do have a monthly bot building showcase type event where we're highlighting a automation that one of our citizen builders created. And then we may do like a demonstration of a very simple bot that we're able to build kind of live on the fly. So kind of a live bot building demonstration, which is a really cool event that we're doing monthly now. And the last thing before we go to the next slide, I just want to actually call back to one thing that I think Wayne said in his presentation, is that success was driven by culture and process every bit as much as by your effort and technology. And I think that is certainly the case that we're finding with our early results in our bot builder program. Kind of the application that you're using and the technology or IT aspects are not nearly as important. Is what's the framework? How are we going to do this? Who are we involved? How do we get people to take on this new mindset or culture change? I think that's definitely more important than the technology aspect. So, and next slide, please. Great. So just to wrap up here, just wanted to give you all a kind of visual roadmap for where we're going at GM Financial with our Citizen Innovation Program. I would definitely highly recommend that if y'all are thinking about doing something like this in your organization, that you would build out kind of a similar roadmap to think about these areas. And there's probably, again, a lot of additional capabilities that you may want to stand up in your organization that we maybe aren't yet or that aren't captured here, but just wanted to kind of give you a example of how we're thinking about it. Again, would definitely approach it from a crawl, walk, run mentality and prioritize what are your core capabilities. Like, for example, here, these top 3 RPA, other automation tools like Office 365, their Power Platform suite, and then process improvement skills. Those are kind of what we're just what we're considering to be our kind of core capabilities. And then moving down this roadmap here, other things that we are continuing to do is unstructured data capability. So we did, I think I mentioned earlier that we did complete a pilot last year with a unstructured data solution. So we're continuing to evaluate opportunities there, and we're able to have some of our business partners actually help, especially at this point, bring ideas to us and help out to build those solutions as well. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, kind of launching the community. We're really working on a formal Citizen Innovation Program launch and what that would look like. So things like creating some sort of an internal Citizen Innovation Hub website, contests and prizes for citizen developers after they get a certain number of bots built, et cetera. So there's really a lot of different ways you can go with that. And then also collecting metrics or data for each capability. So I know I didn't talk about it in great detail today, but again, it's very important to define what your KPIs or key metrics are upfront as part of your citizen innovation efforts. So how do you define and then later refine what your measurements of success or business value are going to be? So again, going back to another point from previously, that it's really all about business value. How do you measure it? How are you, as part of this citizen innovation program, how are we evaluating the value that we're returning to our business partners? So that is the last slide I had. I really enjoyed getting to share a bit about our innovation program, and we'll be glad to answer any questions towards the end.
Thank you so much, Matt. We're going to keep things moving along and hand things over to Rohit in a moment. However, I just want to give our third secret word of the afternoon first. Intelligent is our third secret word. That's intelligent spelled INTELLIGENT. So intelligent is our third of today's 6 secret words. Slide number 27 is on screen now. So whenever you're ready, Rohit, Janine, I believe we're turning things over to the pair of you. So whenever you're ready, slide number 27 is on screen now.
Thank you. Can y'all hear me? Can I get a quick thumbs up from my panelists? You can hear me okay? Great. Thanks, Matt. So just before I get started, I'll tell you a little bit about Cfo, but I wanted to thank Rohit and Auditoria for sponsoring and the Knowledge Group for hosting and helping us get all prepared and organized, and obviously our fellow panelists and audience. So thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to us. My name is Janine Nosker. I'm a VP of Delivery Transformation here at Cfo Global. I'm part of a team similar to Matt, it sounds like, that's tasked with leveraging better process and technology, kind of taking finance and accounting that we do for our clients and bringing it, to the 21st century and the 22nd century. And so, as Wayne is, though my background is finance and accounting, kind of came up through the F&A ranks as a controller, but always was passionate about finding a better, faster way to do things. So I'm excited about the opportunity that we've had with Cfo. So in order for this to make sense to y'all about why automation is important to Cfo, let me tell you about us. So you can kick it to the next slide. So what does Cfo do? We provide finance as a service, FAS, to our clients, and we feel is the modern go-to alternative to what has historically been the answer for finance and accounting, and that was building it in-house on your own. And we feel that there are very specific skill sets that are needed at various levels. You need to combine the people, the process, and the technology, and they all need to be kind of developed to work well together in order for the finance and accounting function to really be value add to the organization and provide transparency and information. And so what we've done is we've created a solution that take the best of those and work together and incorporate our proprietary engagement layer for our clients that gives them the full transparency and information that they need to make better business decisions. And we focus on the small, medium business SMB space, usually PE and VC-backed companies. So smaller than GM of the world, but still have the same needs to be able to provide the same type of information to the business. If you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so we also bring with it, and what we're focused on now is better transparency and automation, and again, being able to bring that to the lower middle market space where these companies on their own may not have the time or the interest or the resource to invest in some of these automation tools that you've heard about today. So we look at it from using taking some of the concepts like Alexa, but combining that for how finance, we see finance professionals using in the business in the future, being able to just talk to their phone and say, what's my cash position, or, what is my revenue? How much does client XYZ owe me right now? Kind of get into what Wayne's saying, a little less of using the hands on the keyboard and just using your brain. We also leverage task management tools and workflow solutions, and then that helps provide transparency for us to manage our teams and their deliveries and just making sure everything is on target. We also leverage automation for our various functions, our accounts payable process, or general ledger close process, even financial review automation. We use various tools, everything from RPA, AI, and Auditoria to help us get to where we're trying to get to. And what this ends up bringing to the table for our clients is a faster and more cost-effective solution for them as opposed to building it on their own. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we feel is practice makes perfect, and this is where we feel like we really do set ourselves apart from the alternative of building a finance function in-house. So if you think about companies, we have new companies starting every day all over the globe, and every day that means somebody is out there trying to figure out what GL should I use, and what bill pay should I use, and what T&E solution should I use. What staff do I need? How many staff accountants? How many senior accountants? CFO, controllers, FP&A. I mean, there's a lot that goes into building, state-of-the-art finance and accounting function. And we haven't even gotten into the process side of it yet, because the technology is only as good as the process that's developed to best leverage the technology. And so we've done this over and over, and each time we do it, we learn more and we continue to perfect our playbook. So we have our playbook that's we say about 80% pre-configured with the right skill sets identified at the right levels, the right amount, the best practice processes, and tech stack, all designed to work together. And we have it 80% pre-configured, ready to implement, with the final 20% that just needs to be tweaked based on our client's needs and our client's business model. So because we bring all of that to bear and have gone through all of those efforts, our clients can get to a fully functional and optimized state in a fraction of the time of what our, the alternative might be. And then this allows the organization to focus on what they do best, and that is selling their product or service and marketing that, and go, for a strategic CFO, maybe going out and raising money to help drive that business growth, as opposed to trying to decide, do I use this GL or that GL? Next slide, please. Okay. So a little bit about our tech stack. As I mentioned, we use a combination of third-party solutions, and we also have developed some of our own proprietary technology when there isn't something already out there in the marketplace that we can easily just plug and play. And we combine that with our simple proprietary technology that lays on top of it, and that's what our clients use to interface to get that transparency, to be able to see at any point in time, what's their financial position, where are they in terms of their cash, what do they need to do for paying bills, paying their employees, all of that good stuff. And it's designed to work more with your business leaders. So it's really simplified down into what we call business speak. For any of you out there that might be accountants or might have had to interact with accountants, we have our own language, our own lingo that can be a bit intimidating or confusing if it's not something you're well versed in. And so what we do is we try to convert all of that to what's going to resonate with your CEO or your VP of sales. And so everything is designed to be able to filter on up to our simple platform, so that they can get the information they need without a lot of questions or back and forth with their finance team. Next slide, please. Okay. So, I talked a bit about the tech, and we've heard a little bit from what Wayne has said about the process side of the house, and you have the concept of what is the hand doing and using RPA to automate that versus what is the brain doing and using AI to help there. But before you can even really get into that, we had to evolve our team from being one that was structured more in what we call service teams, so smaller teams supporting a smaller group of clients, and kind of mapping that out into a functional shared services organization, and then eventually on down to a very granular sub-team. So, you take all the finance and accounting responsibilities and group them into what we call, procure pay. So paying your vendors, or order to cash, getting money in from your customers, to closing the books, producing financials, paying your employees, all of that good stuff. But even within those functional areas, you have different work streams, and the more you can standardize those work streams and get them operated by a smaller group in a consistent manner, the easier it is then to go in and apply some of these automated pieces. Again, I think it was Wayne or Matt that had said about a project where trying to pay bills, but you had 300 different nuances to it. And so every time you're dealing with a different nuance, it makes it harder to automate. So the more you can get it into a consistent standard process, now you can look at, okay, here's this piece that I can go and leverage some RPA, or I can go and plug in some AI functionality to learn from, to highlight the exceptions process that our teams then go focus on, as opposed to them trying to find the needle in the haystack there. So we, while we've been working on this, as Matt had said, for a couple of years, we've been focused on both where we can, getting our team, getting our processes standardized, and then where we find the low-hanging fruit to keep leveraging technology to automate those pieces away. And then you're just kind of looking at to what's next with that. And then if you can move on to the final slide, please. Okay. So again, how our delivery evolution, we started off with just restructuring our teams, getting them into what we call the functional teams and then the centralized sub-teams. And as we get closer into the sub-teams, this is where we're able to solicit feedback from those in those seats, working on AP processing or trying to close the books for the financial, getting their input as, hey, what is the most painful for you? How can we bring about some better automation or simplify the process so it just works more smoothly for you. Obviously, this has great cost efficiencies for us. It allows us to now convert this to more of a metric-driven function where we can monitor resources with their throughput, and that helps us from a hiring perspective. If we plan on adding X number of clients, how many resources do we need then for processing AP? So it really does start to impact and help pull in other functional areas of the business, such as recruiting, L&D. As we centralize and reduce the scope of the resources, we can now simplify our onboard process and refocus the training efforts. We don't need jack of all trades across the organization. We can create areas of specialization. And so these are where then the other ancillary benefits that automation and standardization help bring to bear to our teams. And at the same time, what that does for the staff, I think a lot of people think of automation as, potentially a negative from a staff perspective, but we've really are excited about what this allows for us to do with developing our team and helping them advance their careers more quickly, because they're not having to spend so much time on data manipulation or Excel file management. Because we can leverage AI to highlight, hey, here are the exceptions, here are the anomalies, go focus on that. They can actually advance their career much faster in this day and age than, perhaps I did when I started out back in the day. We won't say what year that was exactly. And so, really excited about where we continue to drive this. And Auditoria has been a big part of that, as we work with them and partner with them. Everything that they develop is something that we can then leverage, that our end clients then get to leverage too. And it's one less piece of the puzzle that they need to go and figure out. So Rohit, you want to take it from here?
Terrific. Thank you so much, Janine. I'm assuming everyone can hear me as well. Why don't we move to the next slide? Thank you for that. So look, it's been a terrific, discussion thus far, and I'd like to thank all the panelists, for sharing their insights in terms of automation and specifically in terms of the evolution of the technology that all of us here can harness as part of the overall agenda of driving towards a more automated future. My objective over the next few minutes is to share some insights on where is automation technology headed, particularly with sort of the move of AI and some of these modern, technology components that have come in, particularly over these last couple of years, that really propel today's, modern, organizations, especially the finance back office, into the world of autonomous and cognitive applications, or an autonomous and cognitive future. Let's go to the next slide. If you think about, companies as they scale, as they grow, particularly think of the finance function, they face, the classic challenges of scale, and Janine, I thought, touched upon that very eloquently. She talked about the fact that as companies grow and scale, you don't want to be burdened with the sort of the overhead and the construct of trying to figure things out from scratch, especially as you set the foundations of your back office. And we see that, especially for companies that are scaling, right? I mean, as you now deal with hundreds to maybe thousands of customers, your AR team, your accounts receivable team is, chasing up with them, following up with them on payment status. As your vendor pool increases, right? You've got your suppliers following up with your AP teams on payment status, on short pay issues. You've got to file, tax forms in different jurisdictions depending on where you do business, right? I mean, there's a tremendous amount of repetitive tasks. There's friction between the various discrete functions that takes place, in the back office. Now, shared services functions certainly can, be set up to alleviate some of that, and we see that as, particularly popular, especially as you go into the upper end of the mid-market and then into the enterprise. But then again, in shared services functions, there's always rooms for greater efficiencies, being able to essentially ensure that, it's not just junior people that are put into a shared services role, and then you've got senior people forever tasked with checking how the junior people are doing and making sure there's accuracy and there's predictability in the outcomes of what they provide. And then, of course, for growing companies, managing cash and managing cash flow performance is incredibly important. All of us have dealt with a particularly challenging year with the pandemic, and we're hopefully all just coming out of it. And the reality is, it's something that, is particularly relevant, if you will, to this discussion, and particularly in the context of managing cash. If your company essentially catered primarily to, clients in the travel and hospitality business, when the pandemic first broke, that was probably a real challenge because not a lot of people are traveling. And so how does cash flow essentially, what's the impact on cash flow in that sort of a scenario? These are the kinds of things that, from a decisioning perspective, from a planning perspective, that executives are always looking to essentially ensure they've got the right, data, the right insights at their fingertips so that they can essentially make decisions, quickly, accurately, and in support of where the organization needs to grow. And I thought it was pretty interesting, the analyst quote that you see at the bottom of the slide is, ERP has advanced dramatically over these last, 10, 15 years. It's now in the cloud, and there's advances in so many different functional areas. But the reality is, in the back office, business processes, span across stakeholders, right? It spans across, your internal teams, your AP teams, and your vendors, your auditors, your customers, and your collections or your AR teams, your revenue accounting teams. And when you essentially span across multiple stakeholders, the reality is there's a tremendous amount of manual work, and this is where the opportunity to sort of rethink an approach of how to address some of these challenges comes in. So let's go to the next slide. As you sort of see on the slide on the far left, the reality is when companies are small, you can get away with manual operations. And that's how companies start, and it's totally normal. In fact, it's expected that, when you need assistance, in a particular task, you might hire a part-time contractor, you might hire a part-time accountant, things of that nature. But then as we've heard in today's session, about 10 years ago, the first set, give or take, the first set of automation technologies showed up, and they've done very, very well. And, whether it's robotic process automation or business process automation, there's technologies out there that have seen tremendous foresight and, that have had impact. As I think Wayne, well called it out, some of these companies have done so well that, they've gone public. Some of them are about to go public. And clearly that sort of talks about, the value that they've generated, if you will, for their customers, and then eventually, of course, for their shareholders. That being said, over the last couple of years, what we've found out in the market is there's a new emerging category of intelligent, domain-specific, automated applications that are showing up that are very, very tangible. These are the ones that are able to dynamically adapt to changing business processes. These are the ones that essentially can deal with both structured and unstructured data. These are the ones that can not only execute repetitive tasks, but they can also algorithmically, execute forecasting functions. They can also essentially support, right, the human operator in decision making. And this is this new domain of AI and machine learning and natural language processing that essentially, when combined with process automation and the automation components or foundations, essentially really catapult or act as a tremendous catalyst for organizations to move, and essentially accelerate their transformation initiatives. Let's go to the next slide. What you find here is really sort of a little bit of a snapshot in terms of what is happening in the market. And this is a quick snapshot from Grant Thornton's Cfo Survey from last summer. And I thought it was particularly interesting. I mean, they surveyed, over, 750 finance executives, really sort of assessing sort of the state of play of some of these modern, technology or modern techniques that you see on the far left, things like machine learning and optical character recognition and AI and RPA, et cetera, to sort of get a gauge of where or what's the state of adoption in the finance back office for these technologies. And it was pretty compelling to see that this is right about ready to take off, right? These modern, innovative, next-gen capabilities of computer vision and OCR and robots and AI and such. I mean, these are essentially clearly called out, as you see there in the columns there for what's expected to be implemented over the next year, over the next couple of years. There's a steady growth, if you will, in these modern technologies. So let's go to the next slide. The other dimension that I'd like to essentially, present here is, some interesting insights that Constellation Research called out. So again, they're a forward-looking, very, very well-recognized, market research analyst firm, and they talked about essentially the evolution to this next generation of automation, or this evolution to autonomous and cognitive applications. Clearly, as my fellow panelists have talked about, RPA has done really well over these last several years. It's a transactional, system technology that enables the automation of business processes using software robots. It does very, very well with that. I mean, it essentially, think of it as technology that watches users and then repeats similar tasks, frankly, in a graphical user interface. And it's different than, the early move of workflow automation tools, with very, very specific rules and actions to automate actions, as the business process demands. That being said, with RPA, there's certainly an overhead required to manage it. And because they're primarily focused on transactional automation, when it comes to essentially intelligence and decisioning, there's perhaps a few gaps. And so in this context is really sort of where the opportunity for artificial intelligence, for machine learning comes in, where, you'll find that the classic transactional automation approaches perhaps have some limits. And what these new modern approaches with AI and machine learning offer companies is the ability to essentially bring in smarter decisions, accelerate delivering insights, reducing manual errors, reducing sort of that whole notion of, as I'd mentioned, senior people checking junior people's work. And then, of course, reducing technical debt, improving margins. These are some of the things that are the benefits that you can get in this evolution. Let's take a look at what's on the slide. This level 1, or what we call basic automation. If you think of these 5 levels, this is essentially the early moves with intelligent automation, with workflow systems. If I were to give a metaphor to sort of cars, think of this as cruise control, right? This is sort of in the early days when cruise control first showed up. There was the opportunity, if you will, to set the automobile in cruise control and not take your hands off the steering wheel, but you've essentially set certain a range or limits within which you want your car to operate. That's very similar to the basic workflow automation, where humans are in control and frankly guide many manual processes. What is essentially the move that happened a few years ago, as Wayne and as Matt have essentially called out, is this move to human-directed automation, or the first move towards the autonomous enterprise. That's where RPA comes in. This is where I look at this as, again, to use that same automobile metaphor, they think of this as adaptive cruise control, right? So it's really the ability, if you will, where you essentially still have people that direct major decisions, but minor decisions can be automated over time with training, or training, for lack of a better word, your software robots to get work done for you. Level 3 is, this notion of machine intervention, or really this concept of where, again, going back to that automobile metaphor, right? Think of a car. I mean, these days you have the ability where, let's say when you're, backing your car up or reversing, and the car sees that there's an object behind, and it automatically presses the brake, right? So it's this notion of getting greater intelligence and being able to understand the context of the business process that it is operating within in order to essentially be able to adjust dynamically. This is sort of the state of the art. It's sort of the next big thing in automation. It's really this notion where humans are still, in control, but they can be on standby. They can be hands off for periods of time, and you can have software that can take over the business process. The next set of innovation, level 4, which is this concept of fully autonomous, where, true self-driving, or, in the context of technology and software, or even infrastructure, self-healing, where, you've got, smart services where software is able to essentially take over a vast majority of the business process and can intelligently course correct as needed. And these machines, these software machines, are typically fully automated. And that's basically where the industry is headed over the next 5 years. And then level 5, we believe, is about, really sort of at the end of this decade. So over the next 8 to 10 years, this notion, if you will, of, truly where you've got the ability to empower precision decisions at scale, right? It's really this notion of you can set a process up and ensure that software can take care of it, soup to nuts, and then report back to you when it's done. This transition, this move, is sort of what is happening as we speak. And companies are actively either embracing or evaluating technologies in either level 2 or level 3. That is basically where, in the middle of the slide that you see, is what is state of the art, right? It is the opportunity to essentially bring artificial intelligence techniques into the day-to-day, into your existing business processes, to make you that much more, to accelerate your decision-making, to essentially eliminate errors in your business processing. Let's go to the next slide. In this context, the approach that companies could take to autonomous cognitive automation, there's, if you will, think of the visual that's on the left-hand side of the screen. And, we built this out to sort of simplify this. But if you think of software that you had to essentially, let's say, build from scratch that was cognitive or autonomous in nature, you'd probably start with something that's running in the cloud. You'd want to have it integrated with your applications. So, it has the ability to ingest data, reconcile data in. It's got to have workflow if it's going to execute a business process. Again, there's tools out there that can do that for you. If these business processes are repetitive in nature, right? So think of, it's got to happen every month as part of the monthly close, or it's got to happen, every day. If it's a order to cash, a collections workflow, there's probably some sort of robotic, process techniques that you will probably need. If you're dealing with structured and unstructured data, if you're dealing with conversational components, if you're dealing with, invoices, tax forms, all of a sudden you're dealing with optical character recognition, computer vision, right? And you'll need technologies for that. Now, again, there's open source tools, there's commercial tools, but you've got to start taking care of all of that. And then, of course, as you start looking at decision making, forecasting, the reality is you'll need new technologies with machine learning, again, out there. And of course, in the back office, in the finance function, you've now got to be able to go in and essentially get this entire stack fine-tuned and ready and specifically tuned for an accounting process or a specific process in AP or AR or treasury or tax or as appropriate. Now, for most companies, that's a pretty daunting effort if you had to pull all of this together. And Auditoria's approach is really in contrast to deliver all of these capabilities in a simple, unified software as a service form factor, consumed through the browser. It's pure SaaS. You don't have to essentially piecemeal all of these different components together. Everything is pre-connected, pre-integrated, certified with the finance applications that are running in your back office and delivered to you through the browser. If we go to the next slide, Auditoria's core product offering are our SmartFlow skills. And we offer skills. Many of you that have the Amazon Alexa device will probably, identify the word skill, but, essentially we offer skills for collections in the order to cash function, autonomous collections. We offer skills for autonomous vendor management and for cash forecasting. These are essentially bots that are pre-trained, that are intelligent, that essentially can, let's take collections. These are bots that are like a collections analyst can be deployed on the front lines of your dunning. They can essentially engage with payers. They can classify your payers based on their payment patterns. Are these regular payers? Are they late payers? What time of the month, how often, how late are they? If, let's say, a payer essentially flags a dispute, these bots can handle that, right? So again, we offer a variety of, capabilities that is specifically built for finance and accounting practitioners. In the middle of the slide is essentially elements of our core IP. So all of these, capabilities that I'd mentioned earlier, things such as AI, natural language processing, machine learning, the ability to have workflow with bidirectional handover to human and human back to bot. All of that is built and delivered as part of Auditoria's software as a service offering. And best of all, Auditoria comes pre-integrated and pre-certified out of the box for the industry-leading ERP applications that you see out there. Sage Intacct is, certainly an ecosystem that we're thrilled to be part of. And we've, partnered with Janine and the team at Consequently in that ecosystem. We are thrilled to also work with the other ERP leaders, including the likes of Oracle NetSuite, Workday, and their industry-leading SaaS ERP offering. And then, of course, our bots, come out of the box integrated with the day-to-day collaboration and communication tools that you all use every day, such as Microsoft 365. I guess Office 365 has now been renamed to Microsoft 365, and Google Workspace, which is Google's collaboration and communication tools. These bots can be deployed on the front lines of your business processes. They can be the ones that can take care of both the transactional elements as well as support your decision-making for your specific finance business processes. Next slide. So in summary, what are some of the key benefits that this move to autonomous and cognitive automation provides you all. The first thing is the ability to accelerate decision-making and get to faster outcomes, smarter precision decisions. Really this notion, if you will, of understanding the exceptions, being able to identify, if you will, the proverbial needle in a haystack, if you will, find out where there are anomalies, where there are risks, and make recommendations so that the organization can get to outcomes faster. This approach can dramatically increase efficiencies in the back office, in your shared services functions, improving margins, improving cash performance. We've seen customers benefit from recovery of thousands of hours annually in the back office. And as I mentioned, this is the opportunity to future-proof how work gets done. The opportunity and the impact that autonomous and cognitive automation has with AI, with the principles of AI, have far-reaching impacts in every business function, in IT, in finance, in HR, in supply chain, and more. And we look forward to the opportunity of sharing some of our best practices and collaborating with you all down the line. So next slide. And what I'd like to do now is essentially, invite Janine for a short Q&A session. There's been some tremendous, experience that the Consequently team has gained and gathered, through their experiences delivering finance as a service. And Janine, love to have you maybe share some of those insights with our audience today. Maybe I'll start off with a first question, which is really, what are some of the biggest challenges that that finance and accounting teams face today? You touched upon this notion in your slides of things that finance teams do, especially as they get off the ground. But as in your experience, having worked with hundreds of organizations, what are some of those classic challenges that finance teams face?
Yep. So I think can you hear me okay, Rohit?
Absolutely.
Yep, great. Okay, I think, from a more of a macro perspective, I think, the concept of the finance and accounting function in an organization is challenged with the fact that other parts of the business have invested more in technology and automation, and they're moving faster, and finance and accounting needs to keep up with them. And the importance of finance and accounting as a value creator in the business is becoming more and more obvious and more important. It's less about, while important, but it's less about just paying the bills and keeping the books, so that you can file your tax returns. It's more about being able to help provide information to the business that allows them to make better and faster business decisions, to capitalize on things that are going well and maybe course correct where they need to. And so that is definitely one of the challenges that we're faced with as a part of the business, and that then leads to where it becomes even more painful when it can take a year to two to really get your finance and accounting function optimized and at the point where it is providing that information. I think there's a shortage of talent out there in the marketplace. It's really hard to find good people. It's just a hot space. So really being able to get more out of your team as companies grow is really critical. And it's like I said earlier, it is there's a lot to it. I think sometimes people who don't live in this space, in this world, don't understand that there's completely different skill sets and experiences, and then just assuming you can find one person that can handle everything from being able to go out and do fundraising and M&A on down to forecasting, to being able to support an audit, to handling complicated revenue recognition. All of this is different. And so, just really that shining a light on the importance of the F&A function within the business.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, especially as, you touched upon there, it's, I mean, I can only imagine for growing companies that as they think about kind of this overall spectrum where you've got to not only think of the strategic growth factor, but also controlling risk, reducing, errors. And then, as you said, I mean, finding that unicorn skill set that can essentially span across all of those. That's almost an impossible task, right? Which is, where can I find those three people that can do it all exactly. And that sort of dovetails well into sort of the value, proposition for Consequently, which I'm sure the audience would love to hear, which is just in the context of how should modern finance leaders, how should today's CFOs think about sort of outsourced shared services, as this has transitioned over the course of these, the last couple of decades. I mean, DPOs have been around for a while, but, the way you guys are thinking about and delivering value to, clients and to the industry at large is different than, let's say, a classic DPO. Can you elaborate a little bit more about this and, how you think about or how you recommend modern finance leaders should think about outsourcing?
Yep. And apologies for the brief interruption. Sorry about that, Janine. Just before you elaborate further, just wanted to come back to give two more secret words to our attendees. Data is secret word number 4, that's DATA, and our 5th secret word, technology, TECHNOLOGY. So data is our 4th secret word, technology is our 5th. Apologies profusely there, Janine, for the interruption, but back to you to elaborate further whenever you're ready.
Yep. So I think a couple of different ways that the modern finance leadership or executive leadership of a company should look at outsourced finance and accounting is one, you do not need to be at the scale of a Fortune 500 company before outsourcing makes sense. Like I said, we really do focus on the early stage and growth stage companies, and they have the expectations from them, in what they provide to the business is the same expectations as what a Fortune 500 company is. So there is, and you can get value out of outsourcing finance and accounting all throughout your life cycle. So that's one myth I think that I'd like to help dispel here if I can. And I think the second is the thought that my business is unique, or it's too complicated, or anything like that it's not going to work with outsourcing. And there are definitely nuances. I'm not to say that everybody is cookie cutter, and that's where we say our 20% to tweak the configuration of our solution is to adopt that. But at the end of the day, when you're trying to pay an AP bill, there's certain best practices that need to happen, and so there is a huge portion of that we can help with, and outsourcing can help with, and they're more geared towards being able to solve those challenges. And then outside of that, what you can get from outsourcing, it doesn't have to be just limited to the transaction processing. We provide all the way up to strategic CFO, where maybe clients at a certain size, you don't need somebody full-time just yet, but you do need somebody in there being the voice of finance within the organization and in discussions with the board about the direction that the company is going, and are we making all the right decisions on where we put our resources, both people and dollars, and are we aligned as an organization with the direction we're going, and are we all rowing in the same direction? You can get that skill set and that experience through outsourcing. You don't have to limit it to just the transaction processing.
That sounds like, accelerating, your clients' value and their sort of getting to their business objectives a lot quicker, and sort of eliminating some of the missteps otherwise that companies, might make, if you will, as part of their growth strategy. That's great. Can you elaborate a little bit more, Janine, on Consequently's strategy for technology adoption, particularly in this vector of digital transformation? How do you evaluate tech and the appropriate solutions and identify fit for purpose within your environment?
Yep, great question. So, if I look at it from more on the, internal usage, technology. So, we've used, as I mentioned, a combination of third-party tools, and we've kind of developed our own technology platforms. And we kind of look at, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Or where are we trying to take our solution? And we look at, are there third-party tools out there that already solves that for us? And will it meet our needs? And will it meet our needs at a price point that makes sense? And if so, we'll generally look to incorporate those third-party platforms because it's just faster time to value, and so that's where we go with that. Then, if that isn't available to us, then we make the decision. Okay, is this important enough? Do we need to go build it ourselves? And so we try to balance, using either the technology we have, other third-party tools, and then developing our own based on what's available to us and is it cost effective. And then if not, then we go build it ourselves. But the more we can leverage third-party tools, again, if that's their area of expertise, they're going to be able to do more of it and be able, we would benefit from their roadmap, the way we do with like Intact.com or Auditoria. If they're solving problems for other companies, we get the benefit of that versus things that aren't out there because of what we're trying to accomplish. It just hasn't been developed. We'd rather focus our R&D efforts on those tools.
That's great. That's great. And in that context, obviously, this session has been focused on intelligent automation, and it's been great to hear the panelists, provide their perspectives and best practices and lessons learned. From your vantage point, from Consero's vantage point, how does intelligent automation coexist with your, with the other technology investments in your back office? Let's say with your ERP application, or you mentioned Bill.com for AP and things of that nature. How does intelligent automation sort of come in, fit in with what is in your back office? Yep.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Again, a lot to take advantage of intelligent automation that Bill.com may have to offer. Let's say, so they have some tools, and maybe this falls more under the OCR category, right? But wherever they have that, we leverage that can help kind of predict where you might code it or route it for approval. And so we'll take advantage of that. But then there are other tools either that we've developed or that third-party tools are developing, and this starts getting into, Rohit, the anomaly detection and kind of highlighting, hey, this is what looks odd. And so what we've had to do in order to take advantage of that in many cases is change our process in order to accommodate that. So in order for the anomaly detection to work, let's say in terms of identifying, hey, this trend looks off, you really need to make sure that the data is being captured at the right level. So are we, it can be as simply as, looking at your spend on your corporate credit card, right? So being able to record all of that to Amex, it's really hard to get the right type of analysis on, where you're really spending your money when it's just Amex as your vendor. So we've gone and reworked our processes to make sure that we're capturing data at the right level so we can analyze it, either at the customer level or the vendor level or the employee level. Otherwise the artificial intelligence, would have challenges with that, if you will.
Yeah, no, and I think sort of, and this is where, in my mind, I think what I've seen this is something never to lose sight of, and that is complementing or amplifying the amplification effect that you get when you combine software or AI with sort of the human uplift, uplifting factor, which is really sort of directing and providing that guidance on either certain existing processes or certain existing configurations or criteria that are relevant, if you will, to your organization, and then frankly through your organization to your clients. The last question
If I can add on that real quick, Rohit. So I think we like where we kind of see, the people still working alongside with the technology and the artificial intelligence is, we look at the AI can help highlight the what is different, but you still need the people in there to be able to explain why. Why is this different? Why is it that our recruiting costs are higher than this month than it was last month? AI can help highlight, hey, this is different, and even who's the vendor that we're spending this money with now. Right. But it requires somebody to be able to say, well, we went out and decided to hire this level of resource, and so we had to pay that recruiting fee. That's where you still need the people in there to incorporate. So that's how we see this continuing to evolve and work together.
Totally agree. All right. Well, I guess the last question here before we, open it out to, audience questions, I guess, is really sort of this, just sort of summarize, sort of some of the early lessons learned in your transformation journey, right? So, you've been at this, and, obviously Consequently's done tremendously well to deliver value to its clients. What have been some of the, the best practices or lessons learned in the early innings of this journey?
Yep. Oh man. Yeah. If we could go over from the beginning and start over, things would have definitely turned out, but differently. But sometimes you learn best from mistakes, if you will. I think some of the folks too already had talked about it, but try not to have your eyes wider than your stomach. There's only so much you can take on it at any one given point in time. And then also, sometimes you'd love for technology to just plug and play and work in 5 minutes, but you really need to think about the process side and allow for some time for things to really kind of take hold. And then, one of the other big things is the sooner you get the support of the organization and understanding and them participating in the process, them being involved in, hey, this is an area that is painful. How can you make this easier on me? The better you have with adoption. And so, that was one thing that we did do with Auditoria, with our implementation, was we pulled in much more quickly the people that would be using the tool and the functionality, and allowed them to kind of see it and see what it brings, and the ideas then that come in terms of, hey, can it do this, and can it help us with that? It's coming straight from the users, and then as we roll it out, they're more likely to want to leverage it as opposed to fearing the technology side. So again, definitely getting the team on board that will be taking advantage of what it has to bring. The sooner you can do that, the easier your lives will be.
No, I certainly echo that last sentiment. We've been thrilled to have obviously the collaboration with your teams and having them give us feedback, input, and then even most recently sort of make recommendations. Hey, there's other things that the AI does, and we'd like to essentially take advantage of it in these areas, and things of that nature have been super helpful. Well, thank you so much again, Janine. It's been a pleasure having you on this panel. Thanks again for carving out the time today for us and for the audience. Why don't I turn the floor back to the moderator, and we can essentially, open it up for questions from the audience, and any final housekeeping items before we wrap up.
Sounds good to me. Thank you so much, Rohit and Janine. But before we do get to some questions from our audience today, I'll give our final secret word: innovation, INNOVATION. So innovation is our sixth and final secret word of the afternoon. And if you've missed any of our secret words or have a question for us regarding the continuing education side of things, you can always drop us an email, info@theknowledgegroup.org, and a continuing education coordinator will be able to assist. We do have a couple of quick questions here, which we'll try and get through. I'll direct them where I can, but they're all open to everybody. So if you do have any additional points you'd like to raise, more than welcome to do so. Wayne, we'll start with this question that dropped in during your segment, and it was just asking, do you have any specific examples of of automation working particularly in an F&A environment?
Lots. to be fair, because finance and accounting historically has been, I would say, for a lot of organisations, the place where they've started. And the reason being is a lot of it, and I think Rohit kind of mentioned it earlier on with the whole ERP movement, is that despite this advancement of ERP, every finance department I've ever been in, I've been in quite a few now, they all take data, put it in Excel, manipulate this data, and then do some stuff with it. And so, that's a real hotbed for RPA, the downloading of reports, the formatting of reports, and then you just allow your finance team to actually do the analysis. So that's one area. Reconciliations is another one. So I've seen lots of opportunity in reconciliations. Now, not everyone, because sometimes you get those really difficult ones where it's like, my intuition tells me that this is the right, account that this needs to go to. But actually, there's, usually a number of different rules that you can follow that get through 20, 40, 60, 80% of your reconciliations. And invoice processing is probably the one that with OCR and RPA has been, for a lot of organizations, a bit of a no-brainer, especially those that are dealing with high volumes of invoices. So there's three there right off the bat that just about every organization will have value from automation in.
Thank you so much. And Matt, a two-part question dropped in during your segment, the first part of which was, why did GM Financial decide to build out a citizen developer program when it did? And the other part of that would be, what were the early challenges that you encountered when you did build out that citizen developer program?
Yeah, sure. Good questions there. So I would say that there were a lot of different reasons kind of why we decided to go the citizen innovation or development route. I would say the primary one was probably that we were just seeing through our funnel originally, we were seeing a whole lot of ideas kicked out of the funnel that were otherwise very automatable. I think I just made up a word there, but that were very able to be automated, but they didn't quite hit the value hurdle that we had based on the infrastructure cost and manpower resources at that time. So we were trying to figure out how can we still automate a lot of this low-hanging fruit. So that was kind of one of the main drivers there, and kind of why we wanted to go this route to open up that additional delivery channel. And then the other question about kind of challenges, I touched on a few of them in one of my slides, but a couple of additional ones to call out as far as early challenges or learning is definitely consider if you are going to have people as part of a citizen innovation or development program, are they going to be full-time automation builders or not? And if they're not, then understand that going in, and understand that you're probably going to have to stay pretty close to them to kind of shepherd them through the initial learning curve. The other thing that I would call out is how do you get the right people on board, including, in our case, our department is not IT. We're actually on the business-facing side. So how do we get those IT partners on board up front? And originally, to be quite transparent, it was not the easiest sell to stand this up, but we kind of were able to prove the concept via pilot and push through some of those concerns by setting up a framework that keeps our IT partners and cyber, et cetera, involved with a lot of key touch points or toll gates. That way they're comfortable with what's going on with the citizen developers.
Thank you so much. And Matt, another question that we do have from the audience here, just asking for your view about the citizen development program. And the question is, how best to implement this in accelerating automation or RPA deployment in an organization which has a centralized RPA, COE, and IT group?
Yeah, sure. So I think the way that we've done it, there's probably a lot of different ways that you could go about that. But the way that we've done it is we still have our more traditional, I would call it RPA channel that is still delivering kind of the larger scale, more complex automations. And we have used a lot of the framework and development best practices and moved them over to the citizen thought leader program. So it's not necessarily that we've completely unmarried how we were doing RPA and automation before this citizen program. It's that we're tweaking it, making it a little bit quicker, more efficient, easier to pick up, providing them the training resources and support, a little more hand-holding, but we are kind of using and pulling over some of those best practices from our traditional kind of centralized team over into our citizen program.
Thank you so much. I want to try and squeeze this question in because it dropped in twice during our presentation. Rohit, it first dropped in during yours, so perhaps you want to take a lead. And Janine, it also dropped in when you were speaking during your conversation towards the end of the program today. So perhaps we could get some insight from yourself as well. But it was just asking, Rohit, lead us off on this. What are some of the key business benefits that intelligent cognitive automation can provide when it comes to the finance back office specifically?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, look, I mean, I think the fundamental benefits that cognitive automation can deliver to a company, to an enterprise, is really around this notion of combining accelerated decision making, right? Meaning delivering those insights and being able to essentially support the organization to get to outcomes faster. And those insights could be insights around financial, irregularities. It could be around financial risk. It could be around, macroeconomic, factors that essentially might, have certain adverse impacts that the company needs to steer clear of. Of course, on an ongoing basis, the core business benefits of technology of this sort is really sort of centered around, dramatically increasing efficiencies across the various sub-functions that exist in the back office, whether it's tax or treasury or AR or AP, so on and so forth. And that's manifested, that results in, recovering potentially hundreds or thousands of hours annually each year in those respective areas. And so, if the expectations are set well and measured continually, companies can see some real value by adopting and by, taking on cognitive automation technologies in their finance function. Janine?
Yeah, I agree. I think, the value it can bring in the practical terms to the business, if we look at external to the F&A function is on the information, and can you get that information to the business faster? So, let's say by producing the financial reports and your budget to actual variance analysis, let's say, if you can get that in front of your marketing team and show marketing you're overspending for your budget, and if you keep on this trajectory, you're going to overspend by X number of dollars. The sooner you can get that information to them, the sooner they have time to course correct. And now, you don't have to worry about too much cash going out the door, let's say, before you're ready for that to happen. In addition, just accuracy, the more you can take human, anything from, fat fingering something that has the wrong numbers in there to you've got somebody new who's still learning and they make mistakes. Mistakes happen, we're not going to get out of that as people, but the more you can kind of simplify processes and reduce that opportunity for error, then again, now the quality of that data is there as well. And then you have the confidence of the organization to trust in the information and the direction that they're going with the business based on information and data. So I think that's where the businesses really can gain value from it.
Thank you so much. And I know we're up against the clock at the moment, but I did just want to take a brief moment to ask our panelists for their key takeaways or their final thoughts this afternoon. So Wayne, you let us off. Perhaps you want to be the first to close us out with a few of your key takeaways.
Wrong mic. Wrong mic, I'm unmuted then. So I guess the key thing really is, again, as much as we talk about technology, this is definitely people and process are really key. And it's the three things combined, people, process, and technology in combination, that are really going to make you succeed. And although it's not hard, it's also not easy. And you know, really think about automation as a journey. It's not something that you finish. It's something that you certainly start. And I think, you know, the future continues to be one that really excites me, because you know, as Rohit mentioned, the technology continues to evolve. It doesn't stand still. And therefore, you know, this is an ongoing process that you will be on, and yeah, enjoy the ride.
Thank you so much, Matt. We then heard from yourself. Perhaps you want to give us a few of your final thoughts as well.
Yeah, sure. So I think definitely echoing what Wayne just said about people, process, and technology. I would just kind of elaborate on that point a bit, that again, it's not necessarily the technology or IT side solutions that are the hard part. It's again, how are you thinking about automation? What's your general roadmap? What is your process that you're going to follow? I think that we're finding out, even though we're probably on a little bit different place in the journey than a lot of other companies, I think that we're finding out that who's involving in the right way, and the framework or process that you set up around these, not just the citizen innovation program, but automation program in general, including intelligent automation solutions that we've heard about today. Kind of planning all that out, thinking about what your roadmap looks like, is really important.
Thank you so much. And Janine, over to yourself for a few of your final thoughts.
Yep. I think, you know, takeaway is that, you know, automation in finance and accounting is here. It's real. Maybe a little bit behind the eight ball compared to other areas of the business, but I think if we look up a couple years from now, we're going to see a lot of differences in how finance and accounting functions operate, and then therefore the expectations on what the finance and accounting team should be providing to the business. So, you know, it's here to stay. Don't resist it. The sooner you can get on board with it and start moving forward with it, the faster, you know, you'll be able to show the value you can provide to your company.
Thank you so much. And finally, Rohit, yourself, a few of your final thoughts to close us out.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Look, folks, the future is autonomous, right? That's where we're headed. We believe that organizations, you know, will have to rethink, you know, how they work with their transactional applications. You know, the future is really around this concept of data-driven digital networks. And, you know, it is, you know, expected to be, you know, one where software essentially is, you know, you have services that are continuous, that are self-healing, that are self-learning and self-aware, and they will you know, augment and, you know, support and recommend and provide insights to, you know, to all of us that essentially are part of the business process to really sort of enable the companies, to enable our business to move forward. And so again, as I think, as my fellow panelists have said, the opportunity is here. The opportunity is now. It's an opportunity to embrace this new innovation and frankly make it work within our respective environments. And I'm sure I can state on behalf of, you know, all of the panelists here that we've got a community, you know, where you can learn, where you can essentially embrace and identify best practices and get on the journey to the autonomous future.
Thank you so much, Rohit. I was going to say earlier that you would get the final word. However, it'll be myself with the honors. Innovation, for those that need me to repeat it, was our sixth and final secret word of the afternoon. That was innovation, INNOVATION. So innovation is our final secret word of the afternoon. And that's about all we have time for today's presentation. If you do have a question for one of our speakers that we may not have had time for, you can, of course, reach out to them directly with the information both on screen and within the materials. If you have a question for us or can't find that information for whatever reason, just send us an email. info@theknowledgegroup.org is the email address that you need. I do want to thank our speakers once again for their assistance in preparation for the event today, and want to remind you that you can follow the Knowledge Group on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram for the latest news and event information. We also have our Knowledge Group podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud, so you can hear the very latest about what our speakers intend to cover at future webcasts. One final reminder before we do disconnect, that being that you will be sent a brief feedback survey momentarily. Should be completed inside of 3 minutes, and it helps us make the best use of your time at future webcasts. But if you are applying for continuing education credit, that survey is mandatory, as you'll need to enter the 6 secret words read today to satisfy your proof of attendance requirement mandated by state bars and boards. So that is everything for today's webcast, as we discussed a comprehensive guide on intelligent process automation, how to best leverage opportunities. And on behalf of Wayne, Matt, Rohit, and Janine, as well as all of the team here at the Knowledge Group, we hope you've enjoyed this afternoon's presentation. Look forward to seeing you at the next Knowledge Group webcast, whenever that may be. And until that time, everyone, take care, have a great rest of your day, and bye for now.